Car 54, where are you? This was a show that was popular on television back in the 1950s. This video is my second video on the future of retail technology. The first video was on robots in retail, and the next video will be on IoT in retail. This video is on helping the robot find the self-driving car. Actually, self-driving cars themselves are handled by groups that I've not been involved with. This is just about parking. To help explain where this various parking standards fit, we're going to use this use case. The use case will contain things that are not part of the parking standard, but are included just to help explain things. So first, we're going to request a parking location. We're going to communicate that information to the self-driving automobile. It will then move to the parking spot identified and park there. We will then go to the robot to go through the store and pick the items for delivery to that customer. It will then find the self-driving automobile and put those purchases in the car. The car will then pay for its parking as it gets ready to leave. We will first focus on the request for parking location. Fundamentally, the request for parking location has three different components to it. One, it has to have customer information, it has to know who you are. It has to know information about the parking areas themselves, and it has to be able to understand what's the occupancy of that particular parking area. So the next area we want to talk about is the parking area itself. And this is the metadata about the parking area, as well as information about what it contains. The parking ecosystem itself has three different areas. Of course, the parking garage that everybody's familiar with, like having at the airport or the mall. Parking lots, just flat surfaces that are single story. And street parking, be able to park next to a parking meter. The interesting thing about them, each of them have the same set of information about them, although the content of it is slightly different. They all have parking locations. Where is the parking facility? They have rules about parking there. We're going to pay so much per hour of parking time. They have occupancy information, how many empty places are there and where are those empty places located. It has a basic configuration itself. How is it put together? And then, of course, the fees. Are there any particular fees associated with it? And all three of them have the same set of information. When you talk about parking configuration, there are a number of key components to understand about the various parking areas. For example, there's an entry and an exit, and there can be multiple entries and multiple exits. Is there a valet parking area? Is there an area where you drop off the cars for the valet parking and where you pick them up? Is there a loading zone? This could be where the robot comes to load the car. It could talk about, is this reversible? In some cases, you go one way during the morning and another way at the evening. Is there an unloading zone for trucks that are unloading material? Is there a disabled parking area? Is there a no parking area so that you can't park there at all for some reason? And so when these are added in, you've got the locations, which is covered by a space. So each of these are spaces in terms of understanding them. And there's a general parking area. And they're in a campus. And the interesting thing about a campus is you can have multiple parking areas in one campus. Like, for example, again, at the airport. As mentioned before, you've got to be able to handle multiple levels of parking, as in a parking facility at a mall. One of the critical areas of understanding is the occupancy of the parking facility. So these are the occupancy use cases. This one's deal with space availability. First one, you may want to request a parking location information. Where is this parking facility? Second, you may want to request a list of empty parking spaces. You may want to be able to select one. And thirdly, you may want to request information on a group of facilities within a specified radius. For example, if you're in the theater area, you may want to get different parking facilities in order to find one that maybe is the cheapest price or the closest to the facility. So we've just gone through the request parking location information. We want to now move to the next level about parking self-driving automobiles. So the self-driving automobile needs to understand the layout of the parking situation that it's entering into. As mentioned earlier, there are basically three kinds. There are parking garages, there are street parking, and there are parking lots. In order to properly park, you need to be able to retrieve location information about the parking facility you wish to use. And of course, there are periodic updates to that information. There are areas that are marked off for not being able to park for now while they're painting them and the like. But to retrieve parking lot information, there's three general kinds of things you want to look for. Just what is the nearest facility? Do I want to go to a specific facility near a particular location or at a particular location? Or are there various services that I want to be able to find? For example, handicap parking. So let's look at the update location information use cases. First, of course, you need to be able to change the data. So you've got to have some kind of standard format for communicating that data. You want to be able to make suggested changes to a particular parking location. Maybe it's now got a different owner. You want to be able to configure an acquirer, somebody who will be able to take the money for you. And finally, you'll be able to make suggested changes. For example, you may do as a part of your analytics, find out that a particular parking spot isn't being used for what it was designed for, and you need to change it to something else. So now that we've communicated to the self-driving automobile where to park, the next step is to confirm that it is parked where it was supposed to be or where it ended up actually being parked. In this example, we show parking confirmation. We want to request a particular parking spot at this particular 900 Commerce Avenue facility. And when we get there, we will find a particular parking space, park in it, and then report that information back. There are two ways to charge for a particular space. In the traditional way, you have the fixed parking rate table, in which case you charge so much for a particular spot. But in the future, as you more and more buy online, pay online, you're going to be using parking rate rules rather than a fixed table. In this case, there's actually multiple components to this process. For example, you have to name the rule. You've got to identify the events that the rule applies to, and then you have to be able to determine the demand for the rule. Then once you've done that, when the car comes up, you have to determine the eligibility for that particular rate, and then determine the derivation for that rate for that customer for that spot. So now we've confirmed where we're going to park, what parking space we're going to use, and how much we're going to be charged. Now we get to go do the shopping. The next step in the process is about shopping. I made a presentation to the Retail Analytics Council called Robots in Retail, where I discuss how you communicate and transfer robots around the store to pick up the various items. The video is on my YouTube channel, Richard Halter. So we know where the car is parked. We know we've done our shopping and we've got all of the shopping material. We need to pay for it and put it into the automobile and finally leave. So now I want the robot to load my purchase into the self-driving automobile. So first I have to find the location of the customer's self-driving automobile. I next need to request the self-driving automobile to come to a loading dock, or I need to be able to go out to the parking space where the automobile is parked. And then finally, I get to load the self-driving automobile with the purchases themselves. So now we have the material in the car and we need to be able to leave. So either we paid for this online before we started the whole process, or we're going to have to pay for it as we leave the parking facility. So in this case, I purchased the parking. There's a set of use cases around it. I processed the parking transaction, and there's a whole lot of components to that are way outside of the scope of this particular one. But I have to be able to communicate from the car to the payment model. I may also be able to purchase services at the location. For example, you can be able to buy uh, Cokes and the like at the facility. Thank you for listening to this presentation on the parking standards. As you can see, that it takes a numerous standards bodies in order to properly interact with the new retail world. Please check out my blog at globalretailtechnologyadvisors.com. You can also check out my YouTube videos, such as this one, at Richard Halter. Thank you very much for listening to it. If you need any more or want to talk to me, you can send me an email at richard.halter@cox.net.